Now we're going to talk to Jonathan Alter from Newsweek, but we're not going to talk about one of his articles. We're going to talk about his book that we've discussed before. It's called A Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and Triumph of Hope. The reason I want to go back to that is because I'm interested in the comparison between FDR and what Obama has done so far. And Jonathan's one of the top experts on that, of course. Welcome back to the Young Turks, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks a lot.
So, you know, as I look at what Obama's done so far, from my perspective, it doesn't look like he's come out guns blazing. Now, he's got a lot of things on the oven. There's no question about that. He's working on a lot of things, but it's not like he made a strong stand on the public option. It's not like he's so far made a very strong stand on financial reform. And I think, to myself, I feel like FDR would have done it differently. But there's some chance I'm wrong about that. So let's start with this. What did FDR do when he first started in his first year?
Well, you know, he had his famous first 100 days, which is what I wrote a lot of my book about, and they were very active. If they had used basketball metaphors in those days, they would have talked about putting a lot of points on the board. He was not a guns-blazing kind of guy, and in that sense, he's similar to Obama. In some cases, he did the conservative thing. So, for instance, the Bank Rescue Plan of 1933 was designed in Herbert Hoover's Treasury Department and adopted by Roosevelt and implemented. A lot of people in those days, just like nowadays, wanted Roosevelt to nationalize the banks. And at that time, we were at the depths of the Great Depression. You know, the banking system had completely failed. Most of the banks were closed at the time Roosevelt took office, and yet he declined to do that, angering some New Dealers, and decided to leave the banking industry in private hands. He actually cut the budget by 30%, which was a really stupid thing to do in the Depression. So he moved left and right simultaneously. He was, above all, a pragmatist, and in that sense, very similar to Barack Obama.
So let's start with the bank rescue program that you mentioned in the beginning. So that seems almost identical to what Obama's done with financial reform. Now, how did that wind up working out for Roosevelt?
Well, first of all, it's not almost identical because, you know, history doesn't quite work that squarely. And what happened that was very positive for the country at the end of the first 100 days is that they passed the Securities Act of 1933, which was a weak bill. Originally, they had the Federal Trade Commission trying to regulate Wall Street. And it wasn't until the next year and the establishment of the Securities and Exchange Commission that it had some teeth. But they started the process of regulating Wall Street for the first time and requiring companies to disclose the condition of their companies before they sold stock to the public. So in that sense, you know, Roosevelt began the process of what we now call financial reform. I think the big lesson here, and I've talked about this in the context of health care and Social Security, is that you don't always get everything you want the first time up at bat. And Roosevelt was constantly, going back to Congress, strengthen the bill, strengthen it. So on Social Security, which was not until he'd been in office for more than 2 years, 1935, a lot of the New Deal types really hated Roosevelt's Social Security plan because they thought it was so weak. It only ensured, provided benefits for fewer than half of senior citizens. If you were black, because of the occupational categories, it didn't cover people who were farm workers and domestics. So if you were black, you were basically out of luck as far as Social Security went. And then later they changed it, and they changed it again, and they changed it again. And the lesson here is that you don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good in health care. You get a bill, and you use it as a foundation to build on for the future. You don't hold out for stamp your foot and get exactly what you want.
Well, that's interesting. So does the analogy hold there? Because as you say, history, of course, it's not perfectly analogous at all, given the different state of the country. Did they have as much trouble passing legislation as we do today back then with the 60 senators blocking, you need the 60 senators to get beyond the filibusters, et cetera?
No, they did not have that kind of trouble. There were things that were very contentious, and Roosevelt did not get everything he wanted by any means. The Democrats were very split. They had a much larger number of conservative Democrats in those days, Southern conservatives. So even though the Democrats had a strong majority, they were split regionally. And there were filibusters. Huey Long used to filibuster legislation. He even filibustered Social Security. And others did as well. They came from the left and the right. But you didn't have the situation you have today where, you couldn't eventually get a bill out onto the floor. The filibuster would eventually end, and they'd go ahead and vote on the bill. So what we have today is really not very democratic. This supermajority where you need 60 votes, and Roosevelt didn't have to deal with that, and he also didn't have to deal with the kind of freelancing that a lot of members of Congress do now. There was more party discipline in those days, and not all across the Democratic Party, because I mentioned they were split. But you could deal more with factions. You didn't have to kiss ass quite as much with each individual member.
It's a good way of putting it. We're talking to Jonathan Alter. He wrote the book, The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days in the Triumph of Hope. Is Jonathan still on the line?
I'm still on the line.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. Now,
that was one of my kids.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. No problem. And Obama's read this book. So what lesson do we get out of that, or do we get any lessons out of that? Because, I think going back and trying to do health care again 2 years from now, whenever it is, or going back and trying to do financial reform again whenever, these days seems like it would be a Herculean task.
No, it really doesn't. Legislation really doesn't work that way. This is the beginning of the process. I know that's really hard for people to understand, but what you do is, what would be impossible is if the bill's killed. Then, given all of the effort, everybody will say, forget about it. We're not going to deal with this for 15 more years, because it was we came so close, and some idiots on the left and right killed the bill, forget it. If, however, it's passed, then it becomes a predicate for making improvements. And that's the history of social legislation in this country, whether it's Social Security in 1935, which was fixed, as I mentioned, on several occasions, expanded and refined. Civil rights began with the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Wasn't good enough. They went back at it and fixed it in 1964 and 65. And but you have to get something through that changes the social contract, which this bill does. And then once the government takes responsibility for making sure that everybody has insurance, then and that becomes socially accepted, then at that point you can argue forever about how to cut costs, how to further provide more competition, whether if the insurance companies are misbehaving, which they probably will, then there will have to be more regulation to ensure them to regulate them even more than this bill does. And this bill has a considerable amount of regulation of the insurance industry, but there will probably need to be more of it.
All right.
But you've got to start somewhere, and this idea of the perfect being the enemy of the good, or if people on the left who would rather see the bill die if it doesn't include a public option, it's folly. It's historically
I hear you.
It's terrifying to me, really, because you can't get social change if you can't accept something that's less than ideal.
Now, John, I definitely don't want to get back into that debate, but I finally, here in about a minute left, I wanted to ask you, so in the end, FDR accomplished so much, right? And he seemed to, and that's why we had this vision of him being strong and pushing all this stuff through. Did he get stronger as his terms went on, or was
Yes.
it just gradual?
He did get stronger, and he moved to the left, in part because, and I think this is starting to happen to Obama, he gave up on the idea of Republicans being willing to, to compromise and go along with him. And so then the midterms in 1934 and his re-election in 36 were essentially referenda on his New Deal program. And so, it's hard to predict what direction he would go. As it happens, Roosevelt started out, much further right than he ended up. Even though there were some very liberal things he also did early on that I wish Obama would do, like jobs programs, direct hiring. The Civilian Conservation Corps started in 1933. But a lot of the other big jobs programs did not come until later on, and some of them, the National Recovery Act, for instance, was a big bad idea. It didn't work at all. So in one area, and this is real important, Roosevelt had a lot less public investment than Obama, even in constant dollars. $787 billion that we had in the Recovery Act is way more than Franklin Roosevelt did in 1933. So to that extent, Obama has been much more aggressive at fighting the recession than Roosevelt was in fighting the Depression.
Interesting. Jonathan Alter, the book is called The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and Triumph of Hope. Thanks so much, as always, for coming on the Young Turks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. Young Turks, we'll be back.
One man washed